And
Cool.
we're back.
Yeah. Hello.
It's the peerless.
Nice.
I'm excited
Excellent.
for our next session. I'll bring us back on track as always.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be doing a deeper dive, or not today, right now we're going to be doing a deeper dive into WHM, the cPanel server.
Yeah. cPanel server is fun because that's actually where everything lives, I guess.
Can you take us deeper, Pilot?
Well, I guess. So what you're looking at right now is, as we said, the server. So that's where all of the accounts live. That's where all the settings for the cPanels are controlled. We're going to go into that. And it's a really useful space to just get an overview of accounts, statistics for a particular account, but also to make sure that everything is sort of aligned, I would say, on a per account basis. So
and for those of you who have had domains for a while, this will actually look a bit different. And that's because WHM cPanel has just changed the theme. So just know that that is something we are tracking and aware of. But as always, you can keep that search bar in your back pocket.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff over on the left-hand menu. But the search bar is generally the way that we recommend to go. You're not going to need most of the tools on the left-hand bar. So just searching for what you need is going to get you there probably faster than trying to navigate back and forth. I would say, though, that we should start with list accounts. List accounts is probably the single most useful page in all of WHM because it is exactly what it says it is. It's a list of all of the cPanel accounts. I do want to make a differentiation here between the number of users that you have and the number of cPanel accounts that you have. So in WordPress, in WHMCS, you'll see a list of everybody who's ever signed in via single sign-on. That's not what this is. This is everybody who has a cPanel account. In the WordPress session, we talked about how you get that, how you go through the actual account creation process. These are people who've done that.
Right. So when we say you have up to 500 accounts in your domain of one's own setup, we're really just looking at that number.
Yeah.
How many cPanel accounts you have, not how many people have interacted with your system. In fact, we recommend keeping those records in WordPress and WHMCS around, but this is the only number that we're focused on keeping curated over time.
Yeah. I do want to note that terminated accounts are taken off the server. They don't no longer count towards that number. The number goes down if you terminate an account. If you suspend an account, it's not gone because you might want to unsuspend it at some point in the future. So that still counts towards the number. And you see those suspended accounts are highlighted in red. We're going to pop into I Love Domains, which you may remember from the WordPress session, just to see exactly what WHM can tell us about an account. So you have the domain. There's a little button that would let you log into the cPanel with super admin privileges functionally. So we talked about how signing in through WordPress, switching to the user can get you sort of an on-the-ground look at what a user is actually experiencing. Signing in as an admin gives you so much power. IP address, the username for the account, contact email, the day it was created, where it lives, and quota, disk usage, and package. Let's look at those. We may also touch on the theme, Paper Lantern, quickly. So the quota is up to how much space an account is allowed to use on the server. So this account could use up to 500 megabytes at a time. It's not. It's using 67 megabytes because we installed a WordPress site and not 10 WordPress sites. But sometimes you get accounts that are a little bit heavy hitters, people who are doing archival work, who need to store a bit more stuff on their account. And there you can go in and you can change the quota. Lauren's opened up the little menu that lets you change the password, the contact email, things like that. Changing the quota says, all right, your maximum is no longer 500 or 1,000 or no longer 500 megabytes or a gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, whatever you have as the default. We're going to turn that to a higher number. So yeah, we're going to give about 2 gigabytes. And that means that user now has lots more space to play with. So if you wanted to install, I don't even know how many times 67 goes into 2000, a lot of WordPress sites, just so many for some reason.
Empty ones.
Empty ones. Now you can do that. But
30 times.
30 times. Oh God.
Thank you, Taylor.
That's so
I
many.
have to be useful, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you always are. But sometimes you just generally have a group of users that need a little more space. So maybe your faculty are expected to be putting a little bit more onto their accounts than the students are. You don't really want to go in and modify the account for every faculty member individually every single time. And that's usually where packages come in. So you see that package WordPress in the classroom. And that's what we call it on this server. Your packages may be named something a little bit different. But what you can do is you can set up a particular package and say, everybody whose account comes with this package comes with these default settings. So the faculty package may have 5 gigabytes of space, whereas the student package only has 1 or something like that. And Lauren?
Oh, I was going to say that, yeah, that's a great point. That's where we can really start to determine or set up different versions of cPanel, right? So not only can we talk about the different functions in cPanel and tweak those on a per package basis, we can do that for applications, and then we can also do that for just the cPanel account itself. So disk quota, FTP accounts, bandwidth, whether or not they can have subdomains or add-on domains. Obviously, because this is a demo school, we have a really kind of limited version of cPanel that's available to users. On your end, you might see something a bit different. I will say in terms of disk space, we kind of recommend that you don't set unlimited disk space, because you'll have a couple heavy hitters that will eat into server resources. So even if you want to give the idea that they have unlimited storage and give, a larger amount, still set a quota here. I think that will benefit you in the long term. And try to keep that as unified as possible.
It'll be a good kind of like alarm bell when you find that they're using 5 gigs or 10 gigs,
Right.
Even if that's quite a bit more than everyone else. You can at least go, hey, something's up here, and maybe we need to look at the account.
Yeah, and they'll get automatic email notifications that say, hey, you're at 75%, you're at 80%. Do you want to clean up your act a little bit?
Clean up your act.
Yeah, but
That's what the email says. It's weird.
This is like the step before rehab. Like, this is your warning. Clean up your act.
So anyway, you can go through here. You can change the package name. Again, like Pilot said, WordPress in the classroom is something very specific for this demo school, but you can have a student versus faculty or advanced versus beginner. And we find that this is a really helpful way of distinguishing 2 types of experiences in cPanel, as opposed to just making a lot of one-off changes, because 3 years down the road, that's going to be a lot to keep track of and maintain. And we find that if you just have 2 or 3 different tiers of domains, that's a much more manageable way of administering it long term. So just something to keep in mind. You can always check to see what package a user has directly from that list accounts. You can see by default, everyone's given the WordPress in a classroom package. So I could very quickly, switch someone's package by modifying it's actually called a plan here, which is so weird. I've always thought that's so strange for WHM to call it 2 separate things in the same window, but you could change someone's package from WordPress in the classroom to advanced, for example. If I wanted to edit the package more directly, I could search edit package, and that will pop up right here. So I'm going to click edit package, go back to that WordPress in the classroom, and that will take me back to that window where we just were. So you could make changes to an existing package. I could also add a new package. And this is something that Reclaim can help you with. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb for WHM anyway. We give you the keys to the kingdom, but in fact, we would recommend that you work with us and just let us know what you're thinking about and what you're hoping for, and we can help you set these up. So don't feel like you have to be in the server doing a lot of work. Most of your work will happen in WordPress anyway. For now, this is one of the places where you would make changes. You can also update the feature list that's associated with a given package. So I'm going to view the default feature list here. It's associated with Feature Manager. So if I searched that in the search bar, that's what I would see. And this is where I would make changes to the cPanel icons that are available to users. So I could come into the search bar, search email, and go in and start turning off email associated icons. There are more available that aren't called email, like there's a couple, I think Box Trapper, for example.
Yeah.
There's a couple. So for instance, if you want to turn off the email section, just let us know. We can take care of that for you. But this is where you would make those changes. So just going into Feature Manager, choosing the feature list that you want to edit that's associated with a certain package, and doing that there. The other thing you can do actually is edit the types of Installatron applications that are available to each package. And I know we're talking about different tiers here. I have this all documented. We'll make sure to put it in Discord for you. But if I come to access control here, you can see this group section at the top, and I can actually create different groups of applications and then assign groups to certain cPanels. So I have this really easy way to, configure each of those tiers for a given cPanel. And access control is where we would check those boxes for the applications that are available to end users.
One of the interesting ways this is used in practice is, for example, UNLV. They will have it so that when a user logs in, they basically have a completely stripped down cPanel with only access to the file manager in WordPress.
Yeah.
And then you can continue to how would you say, peel the onion, so you can give people more complicated things. I mean, it's a matter of building up packages based on what you expect your community to be using and how you want them to use it. The thing is it's not automatically mappable. So some of that will be you changing the package for specific people, should you choose, or a whole group of people. So keep that in mind.
And
it's powerful.
Yeah. So Jen, while you were talking, I pulled up this screenshot of a very stripped down cPanel. So you can see, it is possible to do that if you're just wanting to provide access to just WordPress, for example. That's something that we can set up. Absolutely. What else? I'm trying to think here about, what else
we could touch on Paper Lantern, but if there's something a little bit closer to hand.
Well, maybe in Installatron, show them where they can set some of those settings that when you're in WordPress or something else, like do backups, like, do I want to automatically update all plugins, all themes, latest version of WordPress, etc.
Yeah, that takes place in Installatron. Again, you would just search it here in Installatron, if I can spell it correctly. Installatron Applications Installer. That's where we're going here, the editor window for Installatron. And I go to features, and you can see all of those settings that exist here. So for instance, when someone is going to install an application, do we want to prioritize the www version of that domain, or do we want to provide it, or do we want to, let folks decide between HTTPS and HTTP? Honestly, I wish I kind of like the idea of just disabling HTTP, but I know that can bring about a whole other set of troubleshooting problems. So we do keep both there. You can scroll down here and say, when are we sending emails to folks by default from Installatron? Do we want to give the option for folks to enable WordPress multi-site, things like that? That all happens here. But again, as before, if there are certain settings that you want to remove, just let us know and we can help. The other thing that I think is really cool about Installatron is you have the ability to see the applications that are installed on the server outside of the accounts that they're in. So we're in a demo school right now, so you can see a lot of those have been suspended or, are just sort of exploratory sites. But I love that you can go through and see, okay, how popular is Omeka right now on our demo school? And I can see some of those that exist on the server, a whopping 7 applications out of 170. So it kind of gives you a sense of those ratios early on too.
It's interesting here too, because you mentioned this a bit, but if you look at the featured applications and community building, again, you can remove many of these applications if you want to strip down just even the offering within Installatron of what people see. A lot of people say, you know what, we don't want e-commerce applications as part of our rollout. So there is a way for us to remove entire swaths of applications from Installatron should you need to. So just let us know. They are all related, aren't they, Lauren, between like changing the package, adjusting the features, and then making sure Installatron can reflect that pretty well. There is a kind of like a process where they're all related. So again, if you have questions about that, reach out to us. We can help you navigate that, but also know that you can have applications that only start and are afforded to a few people, not to mention Splot's applications and some other of the custom stuff we do. So
yeah, it's kind of always really dependent on exactly what your school's objective around bringing this on is, right? Like there are definitely folks who want those applications there just so people can get familiar with what's even possible, even if they don't use all of it or none of it or most of it. But it's also a lot of things to look at and be totally is, I think, if you're new to it, just very overwhelming when you're first starting. So there's definitely more than one way to look at that.
And that usually is wrapped up in support conversations too, where we say, okay, what are we willing to offer versus what are we willing to support? And I think those two can be separate answers. I've seen some domain schools that will say, we're going to give you access to everything, but know that we're only going to support WordPress, Omeka, Drupal, and Scalar. And that's it. And we have to make our own choices like that, even with Reclaim hosting, because there's no way that you can be an expert in every application. So
I think that's a really good point. And I think when people come to us, one of the things they ask is, how do we communicate to our community what we're expected to support and what we aren't? Well, if you have that question and you're afraid that someone's going to install like nuke PHP, which hasn't been updated, I think, for, a long time, I believe, it may just be like, we're going to leave that one out, or we're going to leave swaths of them out and keep in the ones we're comfortable with. So again, a case-by-case basis, but given that we have a little bit more time for this session, I wouldn't mind getting back into WHM and just showing you a couple of options you can do right from that list bar on a particular account, which I think is quite slick. So if you go into WHM and you go into I Love Domains, for example, which, back to that list tool, that's where you'll spend most of your time if you're ever in WHM, and that could be a big if. But if I go to I Love Domains, you'll notice next to it, there's a plus button. And that plus button has some actual functionality that we will see again in WHMCS. And you'll see it will say change quota, change plan, modify account, also terminate account. There's also a place where you can decide to suspend or unsuspend the account and leave a little message. Well, those functions are actually also available to you in WHMCS. And one of the things we'll repeat again in that session is, before you terminate an account or suspend an account here in WHM, it might make sense to do that from WHMCS because it reinforces something we already mentioned in the first session was basically that's a really good accounting and log of everything you've done in WHM. WHMCS keeps a sophisticated log. So you have those same functions from WHMCS. And I would recommend actually early use WHMCS to do stuff like suspend, terminate, or other kind of functions that might have a long-term tail that you want to refer back to and say, oh, did we suspend this? Or, oh, did we terminate this? Yes.
That's a great point, because I think I love that you have the option to do that here
Yeah.
in a pinch, but we'll show WHMCS and best practices where you should do everything there first to keep the record book. But it is nice to know that if you're in a pinch, if there's a copyright takedown notice and you lost your password to WHMCS or whatever, you do have that option here to just make changes quickly and then go back and sort it out later. It is worth noting that this cPanel icon, I think Pilot mentioned it earlier too, will take you directly into the cPanel account for a given school. So if you're not school, for a given user. So if you happen to be here and want to pop into their cPanel account quickly to see, what apps they've installed, great, but just know that this is not the version that the user sees. And I'll be honest, when I first joined Reclaim and was looking at WHM for the first time, I didn't even know that this could take you into the cPanel. So it took me like years to learn that. It's embarrassing, actually.
I love that it's a column called cPanel, and if you're not looking at one account like we are, it's just the same logo over and over again. I was like, who designed this?
How does that make sense?
And it's interesting too, because some of the things you can do in WHM, you actually can't do in WHMCS. For example, you can't change quota in WHMCS, but you can in WHM. So keep that in mind. If you ever want to do a one-off change of a quota for a faculty who went over, as Pilot addressed brilliantly, goes over the 500 megabyte mark, you can only do that in WHM on a case-by-case basis or by using the packages. So,
but the packages you can do inside of WHMCS once they're set up, right?
Totally.
Okay. Correct.
So yeah, you can basically determine what packages you want to have here, and then you're able to tweak that in WHMCS. So yeah, once you have domains set up and configured the way that you want it, once you have cPanel looking the way that you want it, the need to come in here becomes less and less, because you can suspend and terminate in WHMCS. You can change the look and feel of cPanel from WHMCS in that way, and you have your record there as well. So, you don't really need to be in here as often as you think, but we of course want to make sure you have, the resources available to you to make changes and be in here as you need it.
Yeah, I find that WHM in general is more the layer of Reclaim. Should something go wrong with your server? Should we need to, look at something with DNS or refresh that? We'll often spend our time in WHM, whereas a lot of the work you do, even just long-term for record keeping and account management, might be useful to learn and get a sense when we talk about WHMCS, but the two are directly related.
And the last thing I'll say here, just as we're leaving, or before we wrap, at the very bottom of the list accounts page, you have that download all records to a CSV file. So you have a really nice way to grab a list of cPanel accounts, which is awesome. Reclaim can also provide this list for you at your request. So know that that's possible. And we'll talk about last login scripts and things later on when we talk about analytics and assessment. But for now, if there are any questions about WHM, like I said, we'll put some stuff in Discord, different documentation and resources available. But if you have any questions, just list them in Discord now. And we'll also have time for Q&A, of course, later today, too.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
WHM for life.